kind of the first segment that I wanted to talk about that the name of the episode is named after, or the name of this episode is named after, is Matt breaking them through analysis paralysis. There was that bit at the beginning with Ashley that was a little bit complicated, and there were clearly like out of game meta reasons for what was happening. But beyond that, I think that Matt did a great job at taking their, what I would call analysis paralysis, looking at it and doing a lot of like, okay, so it sounds like you want this, or I'm going to structure this next sequence in a way that still allows you to do things, but is controlling it in a more structured way so that we actually get through it, which I think is more necessary with his number of players. Like when you just have, 3-4 players, that sort of thing is, no, we're good. That sort of thing is much easier to control and much easier to just naturally break through. Because eventually people run out of things to say because there's only like 3 or 4 of them. But especially with 6 and especially with 7, you really have to, I do really think you have to provide some structure occasionally. And I'm becoming more and more and more, how would I say it? Enamored, I suppose, with the idea of this sort of mini downtime. Like, I think when we think of downtime, we think of it going across an entire day, an entire week, sometimes an entire month. But this idea of like a 10-minute downtime and saying like, okay, you each have like one thing you can do in this 10 minutes. Or we're going to have like a sequence of downtime for 10 minutes. You each have like one thing you can do per minute. And we're going to go for like 10 rounds of that. Or however you want to split it up. You can split it up into chunks of time that most accurately match what you think your players will want to do. Like if they'll want to do things that would take about 2-minute chunks, 5 minutes, whatever. And then you have your overall time, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, what have you. And you then take your kind of chunks of your overall time, and you can split that into rounds and then just treat it like you're almost in combat. You don't have to like determine initiative, of course, but I think it really, really helped them like right before the battle really get through that last minute prep. I think that last minute prep would have taken 2 to 3 times as long. 2 to 3 times as long if Matt had not said, okay, you do that, 1 minute goes by. You do that, 1 minute goes by. Like if he had not structured it in that way, he didn't even like maintain that structure very strictly or even for the entire time, but just even having the hint of it really got them through it. And I think he did a lot of more, I would say, subtle things throughout the rest of it. I think that the way that he played the Ravenites, with them just being, I would say, very efficient almost. Like, I did not really get the sense that I normally get from Matt's NPCs, which is like they're, real people that have motivations and will talk your ear off about said motivations. Like, I normally get a lot more of like depth from Matt's characters, which I think is great normally. But I think here he kind of flattened out the Ravenites a little bit, and I think it was appropriate because it really helped them break through those things. If the Ravenites had questioned them more or like offered their own plans or, butted up against it at all, I think we would have had a lot more complications. I think it would have ballooned that analysis paralysis a lot more. So overall, from the first part, I think he did a really nice job of breaking them through that. And let's read some comments about what you guys think about it. I really liked how Matt dealt with the clear analysis paralysis they were clearly butting up against. I've never experienced AP, but I've worked with DMs as a PC to pull the rest of the group out. Yeah. And I think it's like there's a kind of balancing act in an AP as well, because Matt can't just, or I don't want to say he can't, but I think that because it is an actual play, he is, let's say, disincentivized to have that sort of, to have like a sort of like over the table comment of like, hey guys, stop thinking about this so hard. Like he can't really, I think it is there's a, oh, in this case I think his analysis paralysis is not actual play. I've never experienced actual play, or I've never experienced analysis paralysis. I feel you. Either way, I think there is a complication with actual plays. But still, yeah. I agree. Has been very good DM from the start of the stream. I assume Matt Mercer. But we're starting to see him consciously work on his flaws, I think, around this time frame. It's not. I think that, like, in general, you get better at DMing as you just do it. But like a sport or a hobby or a game or whatever, you get better naturally by doing it, but you get better faster by actively working on it, I think. And there are some like flaws or some, possible issues that might get worked out in time, but sometimes a flaw needs like conscious work on it. He set the pacing by reminding them constantly of the passage of time as they completed their actions. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I loved that from the first half. And then the second half, the Vorugal fight. I think there were two kind of things to talk about with it. I think there's the Vorugal yank section, and then there is the Vorugal running away, or lack thereof, section. In terms of the first, Vorugal versus Yank, I said, man, I like this as a reward. I think this is so appropriate for a reward for all their planning and what have you. But the actual, like, moment-to-moment action of two NPCs fighting is, I think, inherently less interesting than the characters being involved more directly. Now, that doesn't mean that it cannot be interesting. I think that Matt puts a lot of work into fights that would otherwise be boring. I think he puts a lot of work into the narrative flavor of them to make them more interesting, but he's starting at a lower starting point. When we're looking at like this sort of like NPC versus NPC, I think. And we had, I think, two good suggestions in the comments, because I kind of debated it during the actual stream of like, man, how could I rework this? I didn't really get to a solid answer. And one of the things that I mentioned was possibly having the party control both Yank and Vorugal. And someone very rightly brought up, oh, but then they know kind of the stats, and that could get weird when they have to switch to fighting them. And I said, you're right. And someone very, I think, appropriately brought up, you could just have the party just control Yank instead of Yank and Vorugal. Then there's like a big incentive to play Yank very strategically, and you're not doing this sort of like playing chess against yourself sort of situation where you have to like pretend to like, do as well as you can against both. Having them control both could get weird, not even just for the metagaming issues. But if you just have them control Yank, I think that can make more sense from a like perspective of, oh, he's the charmed one. So you could either have just Sam Regal control or the entire party. And then they can play Yank as well as they can. And it matters, I think, less that they know Yank's stat block than if they knew Vorugal's. So I think that could have been a good way to handle it. And then you just kind of play that out until they decide to jump in. Alternatively, I think someone else, because I think that has an issue mostly in terms of player count. I think that while that is, I think, a decent way to handle it and to bring more interest to that sequence, I think that if you just have Sam control it, then that's just him, like a 1 out of 7 players participating in that, which is, I think, a big step up in terms of like natural interest, but it still isn't like as high as I think you could get it. I I think that is much less of an issue if you have a lower player count, like 3 or 4. That's more of the party being able to participate in that sequence, just like proportionally. But with 7, no. I think it's, again, a step up from what they did, but maybe not all the way there. And then someone else mentioned something that I think is very fair, of just pre-roll the bat. So like fishbowl out. Imagine that Vox never gets involved and Matt beforehand fishbowls out the entire sequence. It honestly doesn't take that long. Like, it takes a while, don't get me wrong. Like, fishbowling is not a quick process where you just like pre-roll everything, fight as if it is a real fight. It doesn't take no time, but it's not really that hard. It's not difficult prep. And so then you have that entire sequence fishbowled, pre-rolled, and then you don't have to worry about any, I don't want to say accusations, but any like worries about fudging or anything like that. And you have that entire sequence planned out, what happens on every given turn, and then you can just focus on the narrative flavor of it. It actually takes that thing that you need to do for like an NPC versus NPC fight, which is you have to really beef up the narrative flavor to make it interesting at all. And it allows you to just focus on that while still having natural rolls to like back it all up. And then whenever the PCs actually do jump in, you just stop the pre-rolling. You just switch back to manual in the moment rolling. And that would also allow you to kind of think through some fun narration ahead of time. You could theoretically script some of the battle, not necessarily in terms of like what the results of the dies are, but how you will narratively incorporate those die roll results. So if you pre-roll a nat 20, you can think about a fun narrative flash for that nat 20. And it's something you can't normally do if it's NPC versus players, because you have no idea what the players are going to do. But if you're pre-rolling NPC versus NPC, you have total control over that. You would have total control over that within the normal play. So it's totally fine to pre-roll all of it. And then you can plan some cool narrative moments. So I was like, that seems like a really, really good option. And it is sort of player count agnostic, right? I don't think it gets better or worse depending on how many players you have. I don't remember who suggested that. Go into the comments of last stream to find it and give them a like, because I thought it was a really, really good idea, and it pairs well with another comment. I think it was from G Hercub talking about like really focus on the narrative flavor a lot. Talk about them suplexing each other over the arena and have like terrain modifications ready. If like Vorugal slams Yank into the ground, have a little pothole sticker ready to put on the terrain so that you can kind of update the map as these two fight. And I think that sort of thing pairs super well into the idea of like pre-rolling everything. So I think that is seeing everything now in what is that? Okay, no, we're good. Seeing everything now and thinking about it in retrospect, I like the idea. I've never pre-rolled a fight, honestly, because I can't remember the last time I had an NPC versus NPC fight that I knew about ahead of time. I can't remember the last time that happened. I'm sure it has. It's not so uncommon, I think, but I can't remember it. But I think if I ever run into it again, that is probably the strategy I will use because I like it a lot. Yeah. What's up, Jonathan? Pre-rolling the battle is absolute genius. I agree. I loved that suggestion when I saw it. Yeah. Narrate as you go along. No rolling to slow it down. Still allows the party to jump in whenever. Precisely, Jonathan Busby. Yes. Because since you have it all planned out, you can basically just narrate it as if it is a pre-written narrative, because it kind of is. It's just not pre-written. It's just predetermined. And then you can pause it whenever you want. But it can still have that natural flow and that natural flavor because you did actually roll everything ahead of time. Yeah. Pre-rolling feels weird to me, but judging from chat's reaction, that might be on me. I gotta reflect on why it feels weird to me. I understand. I think I had a gut reaction of feels weird as well when I first saw it, because it feels a little like it feels like adjacent to fudging. Because, you see that and you're like, well, the DM could have done, what's to say that the DM didn't just roll until they got the result that they wanted? But that could also happen mid-session as well. So I think it's fair if you think that if you feel weird about it, or if you think your players might feel weird about it, if they see you just going through and narrating this and like not rolling any dice. Like if you think that they will feel weird about witnessing that, I think it's perfectly fine to tell them, hey, I pre-rolled this entire battle as if you guys won't jump in. If you don't jump in, I will, go through the battle as like on its pre-written track, but it is also set up for you guys to jump in whenever you want. So even though I'm not rolling now, I did do natural rolling beforehand. I think that's a super fair, not caveat, I guess, disclaimer to give your party ahead of time of being like, this fight was determined by natural rolling. I just did it ahead of time so that for the sake of like pacing, you know what I'm saying? Because I really, really, really think that could I could see that being a thing that people are worried about, but I also think it's a very fair thing to just put a disclaimer out ahead of time, essentially. He always gets very frustrated working with the logistics of a battle while dealing with us. Pre-rolling the battle would solve his problem perfectly. I think that there is you can only pre-roll, I think, the sides of the battle that the players won't impact, essentially. Or at least you don't know when they will start to impact it. And then I think once the players start to impact things, you have to switch back to manual rolling, essentially. I think that's the general way I would go with it. But if you have a segment of the battle that is progressing without your players' involvement, I think it's super fair to pre-roll that and just put out a disclaimer to your players of, until you guys mess with this, it's on a pre-rolled track. I did pre-roll it, so it's all rolled, but it's going to progress without me rolling anything now. And then once you guys start getting involved, that's when I'll start rolling in the moment. Yeah. It is, I swear I looked at the channel like 10 minutes ago and there was no stream. Probably Confused Strawberry. This was a very in the moment stream. I guess we've been going for 25 minutes, so possibly not. But I put this up and then started live very quickly. I have an explanation at the beginning, but yeah, it was a little bit out of nowhere. Yeah, what's nice about pre-rolling like this too is if it's a bigger battle, you can keep the flow of the other sections of the battle the PCs might not be in. Absolutely. I totally agree there. Yeah. I think especially if you have, say, here, let me just get up a screen share. Let me just get up a screen share really quick. I think if you add a segment, right, where you are presenting the players with, say a big battle, and they start up here and the battle kind of sprawls out before them, and they're gonna kind of have to commit to charging into the main block or potentially, flanking around the side or maybe attacking a weaker section. If they're going to have to relatively commit to one of these three, I think it's super fair to have the other two sections, say they chose the main one, have the other two sections pre-rolled in case they decide to switch it up and transition into one of the other ones, but so that they can keep going while they're in the other sections. I think it could work very, very well. Yeah. Especially if you want the roles to be more detailed than abstract roles. Because I think normally the way that I would handle that sort of thing is having more kind of abstract, occasional checks of this is how this side of the combat is going. And this is how this side of the combat is going. And I just roll a d20. and update, big health pools based on the result of that D20. Basically a combat skill check. But I think this is another way to do it if you want those more granular possibilities. I think this is definitely a way to do that. YouTuber cowers before me specifically. Dun, 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 dun. Doggo wearing extra clothes, extra cute. Oh, is she? Oh, yeah, Doggo wearing extra clothes. It's cold in our apartment. We gotta have them in their extra clothing. PCs fight and defeat one section. Perhaps things in other sections of the battlefield didn't go as well while they were dealing with that. Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't want to write all of that out as a script, if you are really, really into having those things be procedural, essentially, or dice determined, then pre-doing all that is an option. Now, I think that a NPC versus NPC like Vorugal and Yank, I think that is easy to fishbowl. Or, again, I shouldn't say easy. I think it will be cumbersome to fishbowl, but not necessarily difficult. Now, if you are trying to do tons of combatants across multiple areas with people switching between, unless you're really into fishbowling that type of stuff, unless that's the sort of thing that gets you out of bed, is D&D combat, I think that can balloon into a much bigger chore than you might want it to be. I wouldn't want to do this all the time, and especially not for super big combats, but for the occasional combat, especially at the big conclusion to an arc, that sort of thing. I think it's super doable. Yeah. I see it happy affiliate anniversary. Thank you. I didn't realize it was my affiliate anniversary. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah, if you trust that Matt isn't a fudger, then there's logically no reason to assign that possibility. Yeah. If I think you're cheating, we have a problem. The problem might be your fault or mine, but now the mere suspicion shows there's a problem somewhere. Yeah. It definitely, all D&D, anything behind the screen requires a level of trust. It just kind of depends on how far you are willing to kind of throw that trust, I think. But yeah. What's your favorite D&D monster? Kuatoa! I like Kuatoa. I want to take a look at the new monster manual at some point. I also have to look at the new DMG. I still haven't read through it. So I need to take a look at both of those. But Kuatoa is at least my default answer. I love the Kuatoa. I'm sure if I thought about it more, there might be a monster that I actually do like more. But Kuatoa is always my default answer. What I have done is simplify shortcut parts of the battles. Rather than rolling for all 10v10, roll a single die. Yeah, exactly. I think you can absolutely do a combat check. I've definitely done that before. But I think if you really want that granularity, this is a good option. Yeah. Sharing a brain cell. Yep. Last week we had 2 groups of NPCs fighting a 1v1. We got involved in one fight, but not the other, and then had to spend a long time waiting for the rolls. I think that's a really good example of something that this sort of strategy would work really well in. Yeah, I think that could really, really work. And I don't know now. Now that we've talked about it for so long, I feel the need to attribute credit, especially if people are going to start sending it to their DMs. Let's see. How to stop a dragon fight. I have responded. It was pre-roll everything. It was Sputnik 90. Sputnik 90. Pre-roll everything. Matt knew this fight was likely to happen. Pre-roll the entire fight, pre-game, and narratively describe it until the point where the PCs get involved. Thank you very much, Sputnik 90. Yeah. To clarify, what I meant to say is that I have many YouTube glitches all the time, and I like to think I did something to mess it up and not just it's all targeted at you, Confused Strawberry. I get it. Created Sputnik 90. Let's go. Anyways, so I think that was definitely. I don't think I came up with a satisfactory option. Because, when I look at something and I'm like, I don't like this is bad, I don't like to say it's bad unless I have an option that I like more. And I couldn't find that on stream. I was like, I really can't think of something that is that I think is explicitly better than this. And I think that pre-rolling was explicitly better than that. Save that you have a good level of trust with your players, and that they will not feel weird about it. Now, all of that said, huge asterisk, huge caveat. For an actual play where there are relatively frequent accusations of scripting that I think are frankly baseless. But when that is theoretically a factor that you have to contend with as Matt Mercer, I think that pre-rolling may not be viable. Like, I think it is the right call for a home table with the level of trust that Critical Role has, or seems to have at least. I shouldn't speak for them, but seems to have. I think it's the right call for a home table. Is it the right call for Critical Role? I don't know. It's tough to say because I cannot. It's hard for me to account for the Twitter of it all. You know what I'm saying? So I don't even know that I can say with my full chest that I think Matt should have done it differently. But I think if we're learning lessons and modeling our play after Matt, I think that is something that we should do differently at home. But for Matt, his players might trust him, but we know the internet does not. And this is definitely this has a reliant layer of trust built into it. So what are you gonna do? Classic internet asterisk, exactly. Yeah. For MM at the time, it would probably have been a mistake. Yeah. I think it would have been better, but oh man, I can imagine the Twitter storm afterward. If anything even remotely out of balance happened, you would never hear the end of it. So what are you gonna do? And then, second thing, I talked about how second thing with the Vorugal fight overall, not Vorugal versus Yank, but the Vorugal fight. I said I would have had Vorugal run earlier and frankly more competently. Something that I realized after the stream is that Vorugal has a burrow speed. Given the burrow speed, given the snowstorm, if he had run earlier, when I think I would have had him run, being the DM, when I would have pre-decided a milestone for him to run beforehand, I think it is incredibly unlikely that Vox could have won, given how everything else went. Or not necessarily won. I think they would have survived, but I find it incredibly unlikely that they would have killed him. However, that said, I think people rightly pointed out in the moment that we've already had kind of a somewhat rehash of a boss fight with Umbrasyl to Vorugal, and I said in the moment, I was like, yeah, I really would not want Vorugal to run away and then they just go fight him in his lair. We've done that already. I wouldn't be a huge fan of that. It would extend the Chroma Conclave arc even more. Don't know about that. We floated maybe civilian casualties as a consequence, and I was a little bit, back and forth on it. And in responses to comments, I said, yeah, I think this was probably the correct decision for getting us through the Chroma Conclave. Honestly, kind of the opposite of how I've viewed most of the Chroma Conclave so far, where I have loved individual sequences, individual moments, how Matt has handled things in at a very zoomed in level, but at a zoomed out level, I have not liked the overall pacing of the Chroma Conclave. And I think this is sort of reversed. I think this was the right choice to, in my opinion, fudge a little bit of when Vorugal should have run away in favor of better arc pacing. I think it's kind of the opposite of how a lot of the rest of the arc is run. That said, someone, I think it was G. Herka, had a very good point that if Vorugal had escaped, Vox didn't necessarily have to refight him. They did not have to basically rehash what happened with Umbrasyl. Vorugal could have just gone to Amon. Or he could have gotten Vorugal on the phone and Vorugal could have ordered him to go somewhere else. Now we have real fallout and essentially consequences for Vox's failed ambush and their failure to keep Vorugal tied down, in that Thordak has more information, Raishan's betrayal has been revealed, which you could argue that's both a positive and a negative, I would say. And in the final battle, you're going to have to fight Thordak and Vorugal together. Now, I personally think that is a great consequence. I think that's an awesome consequence. Like, beautiful. I think it doesn't result in a lot of repetition, which is something that you really don't want with consequences. And again, when we were talking about it midstream, I couldn't think of a better option, a much better option at least, than repetition. And I'm very much not a fan of repetition. So I opted for, okay, maybe, fudge this a little bit, do something that I don't personally love, in favor of progressing and pacing and not repeating. That said, I think that Vorugal just going to Amon and making the final fight that much harder is a great form of consequence that doesn't invoke any amount of repetition, or at least avoids most of it. Because Vorugal will be a much different combatant when paired with another dragon compared to him being totally on his own. And not in his element. Like, if Vorugal goes to fight in Iman in the fire dragons area, I would expect Vorugal to be substantially weaker. Doesn't have the snowstorm around him, doesn't have all of his favorite terrain around him. He's not going to be weak by any means, but weaker than he was in Draconia. All of that said, big downside that I can see to this is potentially having the players be even more hesitant and delaying the end of the Chroma Conclave even more. Now, I think that can be addressed through the fact that, like, the Ravenites could easily report on the position of Whitestone, or frankly, like, Vorugal and Thordak could figure it out through some other means. I'm not totally sure how they would do that, but I'm honestly assuming that Matt would have a justification behind the screen, whether that is someone in Iman giving up the location or something similar. I'm honestly not sure. They've done a pretty good job at keeping Whitestone's location a secret. Broadly, Thordak could just threaten a lot of the civilian populations, and they could send a message through Raishan, even though they know Raishan's a traitor, maybe she still has the orbs, and they could say, hey, maybe we don't know where Whitestone is, but we know where a lot of other civilians are, come and fight us. Put a timer on it, and that forces them in. Now, that is really highlighting their failure. I think it kind of depends on the tone of the game as to how appropriate that is for your table. For my sort of tables, I think that would be good. But for Vox and Critical Role, maybe. I don't know. I could kind of see it going either way. So I think that is something that I would have preferred at my tables as a DM and as a player. I don't feel confident saying that it is like the right choice for the average table. I don't know, honestly. I think it's so dependent on like your table flavor that I can't quite say. But I think that is for tables that are like mine, where like you really want like consequences to really matter, and for the players to need to come up with, I would say, a correct solution rather than just a solution. Because I think that Vox put in a lot of effort and came up with a solution. But looking at all the pieces on the board, I think it was missing a pretty crucial piece. And therefore, I would evaluate it as not the correct solution. And thereby, I think it deserves some consequences. But that's not necessarily how all tables run. I would say that the way that Matt ran it is a little bit better for what I would call a more heroic table, where putting in a good amount of effort is the prerequisite for something succeeding. Unless you're like way off the mark. As long as you're in the right ballpark, it should. If you put in a lot of effort, the solution should work. Justified or not justified. That's it is justified to me. Fucking D&D combat goes fucking fast. I'm sure that entire combat with Vorugal was probably like less than a minute, just based on how many seconds are in a round. I'm debating if I would have even bothered. Or I guess not if I would have even bothered. I'm trying to suss out what is the point of having the Ravenites coming to join. Is it just to establish that within the reality of the fiction they were on their way? It feels... Oh man, how does it feel? I guess it goes to establish the distance between the lair and the ravine, but I don't think that's important at this point. That might have been important beforehand for us to know how much distance there is, because if I'm thinking about it in fiction, how this probably went down is the Ravenites go to tell Vorugal, they see Vorugal leave, they come jogging over, and by the time they get there, everything's finished. That all makes in fiction sense. I'm debating on the value of including it other than theoretically strengthening that fiction. I'm debating if that's the only thing it does, because it feels like it might do more or it might do less, honestly, because at first it just came off to me as weird. So I'm not even sure if it necessarily strengthened the fiction until I thought about it more. I don't know. I'm going to have to keep marinating on that one, because it feels odd. Like, my initial gut reaction is like, that's a little weird. Why? Yeah, why bother? But this is a good example of something, if I'm at the table, that I can absolutely justify in my head. There's no smell of necessarily fudge, no smell of chocolate here. It mostly just feels strange. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you guys have an opinion, huh? There's a real chance if Vorugal ran back to his lair, the Dragonites, the Ravenites would just finish him. There's a chance. Yeah. If they didn't show up, we'd be asking that whatever happened to him. I guess my thing is, maybe I would have. I honestly would have just assumed that they were Craven, because I already assumed that was the case, that they were just Craven. Because their aspect of the plan was just to inform Vorugal. So I guess that's the purpose, is reestablishing that the Ravenites are not necessarily living in fear. And that might be important later. I could see that it might be important to establish that they are not afraid of committing and getting their hands dirty. I could see that being accomplished by this inclusion in a way where it would have done the opposite if this had not been included. Okay. I think this is just flavor. It's flavor that adds NPCs and complications. Like, that's sort of the... Like, I praised how efficiently Matt handled the Ravenites in the previous session. This seems to add a complication layer and a potential pace slower, which, as I say it out loud, maybe you kind of want to slow the pace. I did talk about having a slow session. So maybe that's good. Maybe introducing NPCs during the middle of the looting sequence is nice to slow down and provide interest to the looting sequence. Because maybe I should give more details. I think my actual gut instinct is why now, not necessarily why at all. Like, why in the middle of a looting sequence? My instincts are to get through the looting sequence as quickly as possible. But if you are very purposefully trying to slow down the pace and give them a bit of a breather, and if you have to do the looting sequence on screen, it might be nice to inject some NPC interaction into that looting sequence to provide some narrative interest between the boring dice rolls and the accounting on your character sheets. Like, I always say you want to try to not necessarily mitigate the accounting. It's pen and paper at the end of the day. But get them back into the game between the accounting. So I could see this being good there. I could see it being good there. Okay, we're good. So yeah. And this is also me debating, like, if there is a reason that I would consider good and justified. I know that Matt just has a real instinct for playing things out however he thinks they would have played out, regardless of if it's necessarily good for the pace. And so I was debating, does it accomplish anything in the pace? Is it good? Why would you do it if you were maybe purposefully modeling Matt here? Like, is that only good to provide more depth to the fiction, to make the fiction feel more grounded? Because, like, I think the pure excuse of making the pure reasoning of making the fiction more grounded, I think that can work. But I think that people use it as a default, like that it is always an appropriate reasoning, and I vehemently disagree with that. I vehemently disagree that just grounding the fiction is always 100% of the time that always provides justification to anything. So I'm looking for maybe additional justification. And I think I can get there on like providing interest to the looting sequence if you know that you have to do it. Point to raise about Matt Vox loot. I know for you, looting is not additive to the story, but for Vox, they turn it into character moments. It's not just you get this, you find that, and the like. I think that I can see what you're saying. I think this is sort of like, I think this is a similar point to when I was talking about the Vorugal Yank fight. And I even brought up the Grog pit arena fights in Vasselheim. And I think that this is another example of just because Matt can make something good, like he can pass the bar on it, does not mean that the baseline he's working off of, like, doesn't mean that those are all equal. Like, I think that that an NPC versus NPC fight, without doing all the stuff we discussed at the beginning, is going to be inherently, like, you're starting at a lower ground of interesting than a different circumstance. And I think the same about a looting sequence. It's not necessarily that a looting sequence can't be additive. More of what I would claim is that you are starting at a lower sort of base level. Like, they work character moments into everything. This is not a infinite pie that we can just continue chopping out of forever. They are making, and we're all making, whenever we do a session, there's a limited amount of time. And so I think that prioritizing spaces that are going to be the best for character moments, or at least above average for character moments and for interest and all of that sort of stuff, I think it's better to prioritize those and to try to cut out the things that have that lower base level. And so I think that's what I would more go towards claiming with looting, is that it has that lower baseline. Even though Matt and his players do well with it, I think that's more of just a compliment to their skill than an actual justification for looting versus not. Because if they didn't loot here, that would be replaced with something else. It's not just like it would be dead space, It would get, something else would get slotted in. And I will read the comments during the break. We have a break coming up. It's in 1 minute. I'll try to speed through. I think it's to establish they're loyal and kept their word. I think my point is, I don't think they said that they were going to show up, did they? I might be misremembering, but my memory, there was no promise of them showing up. If there was a promise of them showing up, I think that would be even more justified. And I think I still got there in the end, but it feels on brand for Matt in trying to have verisimilitude. Yeah, I think he does a lot. It definitely feels on brand. That is no question. It feels very on brand for Matt. It's just, yeah, to me, it's a question of if that brand is good in this case or not, or in my opinion. Also, another social encounter for them to, given the table, mess up. Yeah, and I think that that's where I get to, in that if you insist on having the looting section, I think it might be nice to inject this social encounter. Ooh, what's up? Hello. Personally, I'm a pedant, and if I didn't include something that makes lore sense that it should happen, I'd feel not good. I think that is fair. This is something where, and maybe someone clarified for this, and I think it depends, and that's why I think this is ultimately good. But this was not necessarily like, this is something that could have made sense, but I don't think we got like necessarily like pre-justification as to whether or not it would go either way. Like, beforehand, I could see the Ravenites absolutely not wanting to get involved in case Vox loses. Like, why would they be risking their skin for Vox? They don't really know Vox's power at the end of the day. So I can personally justify it either way. And I think that the direction that you justify it as a DM should try to be in the more interesting direction. Or if you want something in the future, that might direct you in the present. But I mean, I think that if you're really convinced that like they were going to come and help no matter what, then yeah, he should probably include it. I'm just not 100% convinced. I was also debating, should he include it now? Because again, we don't really know the distance between the two. We don't know where the Ravenites would have gone in between. Like, did they go straight there? They probably didn't show up with all their weapons and armor to Vorugal to tell him, right? They probably showed up just dressed normally. So they theoretically would have either had to stash the weapons and armor somewhere close by or go all the way back. Did they hesitate at all? Like, there's a lot of stuff that I can think through that might justify them not being there right at that moment. So even if I get there of like, yeah, they were definitely, some group of them was going to go and help, it's like, okay, why are we placing it right here, right now? And again, I got there in terms of justification, but even if we're looking at things that make sense, there are a lot of ways that you can do the same thing in different ways to potentially evoke different effects. Like, if they even like, I'll give a really easy example of like a possible alternate way this could have gone, of like Grog and all of them find the Ravenites like hyping themselves up, being like, yeah, okay, we're gonna go do it. Right. And they don't even like notice Grog and Scanlan and Vex like walk up. That's a different way of communicating the same thing. Or if even potentially they don't even show up until way after the looting sequence, like they took way more time. And Vox is like, why did you take so much time to get here? And maybe they make a bunch of excuses, and then they love to roll insight. So they roll insight and they discover, yeah, they weren't sure if they were going to show up or not. You know, all of these extra things are, I think, possible other iterations. So it's also a question of like, why, not only like why do it in general, but why do it now in this way is also what I'm sort of thinking about in this. Even if you have YouTube Premium, you don't get to skip the break. I mean, unfortunately, I have to take like bathroom breaks. Did you get like a live ad with YouTube Premium? I definitely thought that with YouTube Premium, you wouldn't get one of the live ads. That would be interesting. I didn't know that, if that's the case. There's no real way to do that for a live stream unless those with ads just didn't get to see content. Oh, yeah. Like, I still have to take breaks. And I don't want people with premium to get served ads during the middle of content. Honestly, I considered it. If it started them where they left off, I might actually do that, and then people could just put it on a higher speed and catch up. But the way that it works is you get served an ad, and then it pops you back in as if you were watching the stream during the duration of the ad, which then means that like the viewer would have to like rewind and like try to find where they were and then speed up, and that's a whole thing. So I take regularly scheduled breaks for me to go to the bathroom and get water, and then I play the ads during that. Did I just see a comment get deleted in real time? Maybe I didn't delete a comment, but I guess I don't know. Oh, message retracted. Oh yeah. If it's message retracted, you might see it. Yeah. Don't they like accompany him for hunts? It would make sense. They'll be geared up. Maybe. I don't remember that. Possibly. I don't really remember that exactly. Alerts the dragon while Group B is lying in wait. Yeah, that totally could have happened. Yeah. So my thought process is not only just, again, it's not only why do this in general, but what does doing it now in this way communicate? And is that what Matt meant to communicate? I don't know. But it's something that I kind of log in the back of my mind of like, okay, it seems like from my understanding of the situation, it seems like they were pre-decided to come and help Vox. And that either there was a separate group lying in wait, or they hid their weapons and armor close by and then came to help, like pretty immediately, which does communicate some things about them as opposed to doing it any other way. That communicates some additional things, yeah. You don't get an ad, but you do get the break screen. Gotcha. Yeah. Since I know you need to hydrate or dehydrate, gotta hydrate or dehydrate. But, anyways.
Where Vorgal had placed as the new layer in this northern portion of the ravine. You guys that are staying behind, you're inside the mansion. You two, as you're carving your way into the dragon, all of a sudden you hear the footsteps and a bunch of these dragonborn armored, but looks to be scavenged pieces, kind of piecemeal, leather hide with metallic bits, armor, weapons, definitely not of the highest degree from what you can tell. For some, though, some are ornate and seemingly unused, maybe scavenged from the fall of Draconia. Approach and kind of slow in their jog and look over at the destroyed corpse of the dragon.
Hi.
Things went well.
Man, how long of a jog is that?
We all just kind of look confused at each other and start talking to each other in the language you don't understand.
Man. Oof, Bex isn't here.
No.
All good. Good. Yes.
They nod, and Skork kind of gives like a respectful nod, and they all approach the dragon's corpse and start hacking into it.
Wait, no.
I'm just...
I'm going to point it out. You all, the sun goes down, all of us, drink.
Speaking of adding interest to the looting scene. That's great. Yeah, a lot, and that is the other layer to this of even if it's an in-fiction grounding thing, can you use it in other ways? Can you use it to accomplish more, to do more with less? And I think that Matt is absolutely doing that here. Injecting it in the middle of this looting scene that he has to have allows them to have these a little bit of additional, like someone said earlier, character moments. Like, you can have just natural character moments while they're looting, but this allows for some additional funny ones, levity, a little bit of breakup to the pacing. I like it. Yeah, sharing.
Back there. Go back. Everything's fine.
Skork takes 2 steps forward and goes, I understand and speak.
Why didn't you say something? You're just standing there. It was making me very nervous.
Look, we have come to aid you in the battle as promised.
Oh, they did
You
promise.
have seemingly done well without our presence.
I
So, let us all harvest the uses of what remains of this beast.
Yeah, there's enough dragon.
I'm fair with that.
There's
All right.
so much dragon.
Harvest gently, though. We're trying to keep as much of it.
Just let me, I'm working right here on this area, and Vex wants a claw. So,
Take what you wish.
trust me, no one will disappoint her. So,
We are interested in hide and meat.
We are interested in scale, tooth and claw, and maybe some eyeball. So that works out very well.
and blood.
Perhaps some teeth and claws as well.
That's fair.
We shall
Sure,
try.
yeah.
We got coolest.
And all of them rush up and start hacking into the soft portions of the underbelly.
That's fine. That works. That's
so
Sure,
that have
yeah.
been exposed from where you guys have left large wounds and such, and basically starting to carve huge bits of dragon meat. off
Mind the
body.
tree. Mind the tree.
One of them was going for the tree and stops, like, and then looks very confused. The tree wasn't piercing through the dragon, but is rooted inside of it. And they all kind of take a moment, start carving around it. It's a very awkward kind of. They don't know what the hell happened. It looks very strange from an outsider perspective, but they're trying to adjust best they can.
New town square will be built.
In the meantime, the 3 of you guys coast down towards the lair. You can still see all the ice spires that are jutting out from portions of the snow. The various dragonborn corpses still adorning a number of the spires. As you begin to approach the throne of Vorgal, you can see there's a group of about 15 or so Dragonborn currently there that are just starting to kind of climb up and get to that portion to inspect. You see.
Also, I don't think I mentioned it at all. Maybe because I didn't think of it. I don't know. But I do like the aspect of freezing all of Vorugal's loot in, I think you call it Vorugal's throne in the lair, right? Having it all frozen underneath there, I like a lot as a sort of an, I don't want to say impossible, but a pretty sturdy defensive measure in the short term, but a fairly weak and destructible defensive measure in the long term, especially if they kill Vorugal or if Vorugal moves, you know, because it seems like, especially with the snowy climate not being the native climate of Draconia, even if Vorugal just leaves, ostensibly from what we know, the throne would just melt. So all of that loot would be freed with basically no extra work. And on the scale of a combat, you know, a minute, you'll have to put in some resources to get that loot out. But on the scale of minutes, you know, dozens of minutes, hours, ice isn't that hard to get through. I think it's at least possible to sort of isolate and then maybe heat up the remains with like keyless flame hands or something. So I like it. I like it as a barrier because it serves like as, again, a barrier that they would have to spend resources to get through in the short term, but is basically free in the long term, which is I don't want to say necessarily a rare balance, but I think it's a good thing to keep your eye out for. Because a lot of times if you have a, like an objective, say, like a MacGuffin, and you want the party to stick around for a combat encounter, or a social encounter or what have you, and it would be possibly easier for them to just grab the MacGuffin and hoof it, but you want them to do your cool social or combat encounter, it's worth noting down these sorts of barriers that can hold the party in place for the duration of an encounter, but don't require anything special outside of an encounter. And it can even go towards increasing the not necessarily stakes, the tension of stealth sequences, because stealth sequences kind of live in that gray area of timing where you have more time within a stealth sequence than you do in like a combat, like more like literal raw time. But a lot of times making noise or, you know, doing anything will make you short on time. So the barrier in this case provides like a natural timer of like, fuck, we got to get through this before the people show up. And it's something that is get throughable. It is something you can get through. It'll just take some time. And that's great for a stealth sequence or a sequence where they've gotten ahead or they've delayed an enemy and now they're trying to get out. I like it. Freezing stuff. I'm going to keep it in the back of my mind. Never heard Travis say that before. A dragon skeleton with a tree growing out of it would be a badass town center. It's like the sun tree. We've got a new special tree. Yeah, it would be badass. Yeah. What's up, Epster? Personally, I think Matt froze Primaria as a lore thing, but works either way. Again, I mean, things can be lore things, but I think it is worth also separating them into what is a lore thing that is doing other stuff and what is a lore thing that is just there as a lore thing. Because one is more valuable. You know, one is more dense with value, whereas the other only accomplishes a single thing. Are the Dragonborn eating dragon meat? Is it like human eating chimpanzee? I guess it depends on the origin of Dragonborn in your setting, I suppose. It is death set dressing. The image of an isolated snowy ravine with an enormous white dragon corpse and a gnarled tree growing out of its neck, slowly decomposing. Yeah, it does look cool. Oh, fuck. I lowered the camera too much. Oh, no. La, 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 la. lore without reason is a bit worthless. You know, I don't find myself fully agreeing with that. Almost used later as foreshadowing. Yeah, yes. I think more of my sort of, or I guess more of what I'm getting at is that it is not, I'll use that term again, like dense with value. I think it can have value either as foreshadowing or independently, depending on the table. And depending on how much possible lore you give them, like over the table or outside of it. If you're giving them like a 20-page primer before they even join the campaign, or if you're playing in a setting that you all know really well already, maybe the value oscillates. But I'm more just highlighting that it is not as dense in that moment. And so you have to have, or not have to, but I think it's good to have extra reasoning other than just its lore. Yeah, I mean, I think Ross, you're kind of referring to, I would say like foreshadowing there. Or I would say that's similar to Daniel Grace of like lore without reason can almost always be used later as foreshadowing. I think that is the lore isolated, right? Just sitting there. Like if Matt gave us the history of like Imanian naming conventions and it never came up again, he just took 20 minutes during the session to give us the history of Imanian naming conventions and it just didn't matter. I don't even know that I would necessarily call that worthless, but it's very low. It's very, what's the opposite of dense? Spacious. I don't know. Very thin in terms of value for the time it's taking up. But if you can work it into later plots, if you can use it later as foreshadowing, even if you didn't plan it as foreshadowing, if you can use it later and like retroactively essentially make it foreshadowing, that definitely adds value to it, even posthumously, essentially. Or maybe not posthumously, retroactively, yeah. So that's where I get into the mindset of, is it doing anything extra in the moment? Is it doing anything retroactively? All that sort of stuff. And this isn't even to say that like 100% of your sessions are going to be value dense, You're going to oscillate as a DM, as a table, day to day, session to session, depending on how you're feeling that day, depending on how much time you had to prep. But I think that keeping these sorts of things in mind can help you kind of raise the average, take it from like maybe a good session to a great session. Possibly. Yeah. For the sake of lore can be overwhelming and take up time, they can be better spent building character and relationship. I think it's all about taking up time. How much value does it add per like minute spent, essentially. Same thing with the looting that we were talking about earlier. I think looting, yeah, value thin. Could that time have been better used? Now, that said, like I said, I think it's appropriate for Matt to do it for the sake of the actual play. And I think he's handling it well of injecting some stuff to make it more valuable. Adding value to the looting sequence by involving the Ravenites within it, potentially introducing disagreements or question marks from the Ravenites that maybe Vox doesn't want to answer. I think there's a lot of value that is added to the looting by introducing the Ravenites in this moment. Yeah. The way I like to do it is A, name a thing, B, players notice and make fun of the name, C, creating a naming scheme and pretend like the naming scheme is always there. That's the best way to do naming. Yeah. One Piece is a great example of a story without useless lore. The One Piece SPS tends to have a lot of useless lore, but it's separate to not distract from the story. Yeah, like you could have like a world anvil that is there for your players to peruse if they wanted to, yeah. I think I don't see lore as the same as others here. Potentially. Yeah, we could be operating under different assumptions here. Like, I think that if I had to explain my thought process on like when we're talking about lore here, I'm viewing like Vorugal freezing the treasure as flavor and lore about like how white dragons operate. Right? I think that that is very much like you could see that as kind of a lore drop. And that could operate as foreshadowing later if they ran into another white dragon. They might know later on, hey, even though we can't see the dragon's horde, maybe like the floor of the dragon's lair, wherever they are, is made of ice, but it's all covered with something, or it's scratched up, it's occluded. And this, Vorugal's lair, could serve as lore foreshadowing for them to ultimately find that treasure later. But if they never encounter another white dragon again, I think that it is still lore, but it is much thinner in terms of its value in the moment, because it's not doing anything outside of that. Now, again, I think that the ice provides a very cool barrier. Like, I think it provides value in that way, totally separately. But that is it being lore building and like mechanically impactful simultaneously, not necessarily connected to each other. Potentially. Lore and world building feel like different things to me. Oh, interesting. Maybe we're all operating under different assumptions. I consider lore to be more about history, while world building is more cultural or geographic details. I think that's a fair distinction. I think it's tough for me because, and this is maybe revelatory. Revelatory? Yeah, fuck it. Why not? I think this is revelatory about my mindset. Is world building is both a noun and a verb. And so I think that the noun of world building is, I absolutely agree with what you described. But I also think that the verb of world building goes towards creating the noun world building and creating lore. Like, the process of creating lore, I would classify as world building. Now, that's all just my internal gut reactions. I don't know if that's the most useful ways to think of them, but I think that is how I instinctually think of them, yeah. In my head, lore is the blueprint of how the world works, as in how magic works, countries are structured, things like that. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that sort of, that fits with what I was thinking about the white dragon, of like, this is how the world works, this is how white dragons hide their treasure. But I think that I kind of come to the fact that, like, there is infinite lore about how the world works. Like, in the modern day, we do science to essentially discover lore by that, definition. So there's infinite lore that the GM could deliver. So lore needs more justification than just itself to necessarily, or actually, I take that back. It doesn't need more justification. I do see value in, like, if this is just how white dragons work in this world, then by the very nature of including a white dragon, you kind of have to include how they work. I can get down with that. Now, I will sort of add on to that. I think it will, or I think it is a good practice to, when you are world building. Because to my understanding, this is not inherently how white dragons work. I could be wrong. Actually, I'm you know what? I'm curious. Why not? Ancient, because I think it's possibly relevant to this discussion. Ancient white dragon. Does it say that they? Okay, I will note immediately. White dragons lair in icy caves and deep subterranean chambers far from the sun, etc., etc. Do they? Does it say that they freeze their? It doesn't appear so. Icy walls block off areas in the dragon's lair. So this is how Rhymefang was structured, was the icy walls. So I think in this case, I would say that Matt world built, I would say he world built extra lore, and the process of world building extra lore can just be a fun thing for you as the DM. I ain't gonna begrudge a DM that. No question. But I think it is more useful when the extra world building or the homebrew world building also accomplishes other things. Like, I think that the extra world building that is, it doesn't appear so unless I'm skipping it, because I am skipping this. Unless I'm skipping something where the Ancient White Dragon does always freeze their loot. I think that Matt's additional lore, like the lore that he added on to the White Dragon, I think it's a really good addition, because not only is it relatively just interesting lore just on its face, but it also accomplishes something mechanically. I think it presents an interesting challenge and factor to his players it makes sense, it's grounded, it feels right, and it provides this additional mechanical sort of effect by freezing it as opposed to just having it piled. So it's not necessarily that it isn't lore. I think I would just call it more valuable lore. And not to say that lore has, like, you know, inherently zero value. If we say that, you know, lore has like a base value of, I don't know, 1 out of 10, on a negative 10 to 10 scale, it's like a 1. You know, just having it is nice. I think that providing it with an additional mechanical sort of bit raises it to like a 5 or a 6, kind of depending on how interesting that mechanical thing is. So it's kind of like everything that we've been talking about so far. It's like additional value density. Like, these things can be valuable in isolation, but you can make them more valuable by world building them in clever and mindful ways, I think. Yeah. The lore is about as ill-defined and misunderstood as fudging. Yeah, sure. I see the ice thing as a detail more than lore. Okay, sure. I can see that. Like, lore is more like broad strokes. I can see that. 2 noodles in a soup. They are 2 different things, but all tangled up and blurred together unless you very meticulously pick it apart. That's a decent analogy. Does that make scientists world builders? Because that's badass. I'd say so. Or at least world explorers. Archaeologists. Yeah. I view lore as anything that isn't directly related to the story. Ooh. And something that can't be affected by the players. Ooh. That's interesting. That's an interesting distinction. I think that could make it, like having that more constrained definition could be useful for like thinking through it. But I definitely don't think about it that constrained. Especially because a lot of times my stories are so bound up in the world building, and I don't think about discrete arcs all that often. But I could see that thinking about lore in that way and being like, I'm going to build lore today, could actually help in presenting more cohesive stories if you kind of separate it out that way. I could see that being beneficial. A beneficial way to think about it. Yeah. Everything's a bit nuanced in the end. Yeah. It seems like the classic improv technique of next most logical step to me. Matt is taking the info given by the monster manual and yes-anding it, basically. Yes, and I think that even more than that, he is yes-anding it in a mindful and clever way, which I think you can extend the improv analogy for. Like, you can yes and into anything, even things that either don't make sense or, I think more commonly, are just kind of boring. I think this is like a lot of times what bad improv feels like, is when you yes and you theoretically follow all the rules, but the thing you yes and into is just not that funny. And that, I think, analogy can be taken into here of Matt could have yes-anded the monster manual into saying that I'm trying to think of a good but boring thing that he could have yes-anded it into. He could have theoretically, I think this would have been worse. I don't even think this necessarily would have been bad, but I think it would have been worse, is he could have layered the loot. So it says that they have the Icy White Dragons things have like all of these walls, like each wall is this thick, whatever. He could have layered the loot from least valuable towards the exit to most valuable towards the inner area, like where the dragon actually is. And I think that is a theoretically logical yes and, But I think it makes the dragons much dumber, which maybe that's something that you're going for. But even more pertinently, I think it would be a pace killer. You know, if they're constantly like looting these things as they break through each successive wall, I think it would be a total pace killer in justification of this additional lore. Whereas I think that Matt just taking it all and freezing it in a giant ice block is also a reasonable yes and I think adds some benefit or adds some value to the pace and to the way that they interact with it. Yeah. It feels like using the word lore is a subjective value judgment. Yeah, true. Absolutely. Description that is put in the game without any story relevance is always lore, but stuff relevant to the story can be and often is lore too. I think that's fair. I think even stuff that is just confirming what the players assume about the world anyways, like there is farming somewhere, is lore. It doesn't have to be something interesting. It's not that it necessarily has to be interesting, and it doesn't have to be anything. Yeah, I think that like lore existing at a base can just add value. But I think that there are ways to structure it to where it adds more value, right? Even if it is seemingly uninteresting, just confirming that there is farming somewhere could be more or less valuable depending on the context. Like if you find evidence of modern crop farming outside of Iman, like, you know, days old, like they very recently plowed, that would imply something cool that Thordak is allowing people to get back to building society. That he isn't just destroying it and turning it into ash and ruin. He does want to allow them to start building back up value. If you found, you know, evidence of farming right outside of Iman, evidence of recent farming. But in another context, that could add basically zero value and just be like taking up time. Or add very, very little value. And it could have been better to take up that time with other things. Hold on to the layering thought. Uh-oh. We'll see. I think the best in people. I wish I was like that. Truly. I don't mean that in any sort of negative way. Like I truly I've actively tried to start giving people more like benefit of the doubt and like seeing the best in people, because I do truly think that it is a more
Stay tuned, and we'll see in a minute.
God damn it. That was supposed to not do that. What the fuck? I truly think that it's a better and like healthier way to live. I think that consistent pessimism or like not thinking the best in people is truly a worse way to live. I think it is worse for your mental state. Yeah. Then again, I feel like that's the nature of growing up and having healthier convos about things we dislike. I mean, healthier conversating in general, I think is definitely going to give you a better view on people. Yeah. Timestamp for after the break. But yeah, I definitely I used to be much more on the not Plato's razor, not Occam's razor. What is it? It's like it's something along the lines of like misunderstanding or don't assume maliciousness when you can assume stupidity instead. Like I used to be very on that wave, and I have tried to build in much more of like Hanlon's. Yes. Hanlon's razor. I used to, consider incompetence or stupidity over malice, which like I do think that is fair. I think people are rarely malicious, truly. Like sometimes it does happen, but I think it's much more rare than it seems or than people maybe give it credit for. But I also think that sets up a very bad us versus them mentality. And so I try to add in and like a way that I've tried to get more like empathetic intellectually, like as an intellectual pursuit, try to get more empathetic is why assume malice when you could assume incompetence or stupidity, and why assume incompetence or stupidity when you could just assume misunderstanding or different assumptions. Like, I think there is so much of that appears malicious, appears in bad faith, when it is truly two well-intentioned people just coming in with different assumptions about the situation. And that has made me progressively be able to assume more out of, like assume better out of people. Before I worked that into my thinking, I definitely tended to assume not the worst, but worse about other people. But when I started trying to work in just, it's possible that there is just misunderstanding here, that has allowed me to more consistently assume the best or better in people. Yeah. The only thing I dislike about Hanlon's razor is that it can give malicious people a thing to hide behind. But no quip is perfect. I can't expect it to worse. Yeah. It's just like a fallback heuristic. It definitely cannot be implied in all. Yeah. I like to believe in the best until. Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I think that is like proven otherwise. Yeah. I think that's a truly healthier way to live. I think you're going to have less stress, less anger, and stress and anger are both incredibly bad for your physical and mental health. So I think that is truly just a better way to live. Yeah. Anyways, back to it.
Big money.
Dude, I've never thought about this before. This is a fresh, hot off the presses thought. But what just happened right there? Because I've always been relatively neutral on Artificer being a spellcaster. I've always been relatively neutral on that fact. I've understood arguments that they should be more of a martial just with these magic items. Or I've seen some arguments that they should be more of a caster, more like a wizard, maybe even a subclass of the wizard. But that right there actually, to me, is a good example of why they probably should be a half caster with consistently prepared spells from their subclass, sort of like cleric gets all those spells from their subclass. Because I've often talked, we've often talked about all of Percy's invention and how real life physics shouldn't be applied to D&D, etc., etc. They don't have the things that we have in terms of technology, but they also do have magic, and magic can overcome quite a few of those technological barriers in terms of making things that appear more like modern technology with relatively like reduced quality tools and reduced quality resources, right? They're like raw resources. Magic can overcome a lot of that. And so this is the first time where I'm like, oh, I think it's very appropriate for Artificer to be a half caster, so that they have inbuilt access to magic as an extension of their technological tools and prowess. Yeah. Hot off the presses thought. I think are the names of all the C2 characters. All the C2 characters? Let's see. Okay, I'll give vibe checks based on what I remember. And then if anyone finds the more specific predictions, number one, I would just enjoy seeing those again. And I will give modifications based on any of the C2. I think I remember my vibes for Liam the most because they're very strong vibes. I think that I'll switch back to screen share. Why not? So that I can highlight them. I think that Liam is going to be a like noir former detective alcoholic wizard. I think he's going to be a wizard, and I think it is like he did some fucked up shit in his past, and now he's drowning his sorrows at the start of C2. And I think with that, in terms of background, I think background is either going to be like soldier or like maybe Noble. Noble doesn't even really fit. I'd actually need to go and see what the backgrounds that were available for them was. D&D background, because we've got plenty of time. It's only 5. Let's see. Acolyte, no. And a lot of these they wouldn't have had access to. So I'm just looking. Actually, wait. I can set the source for PHB. Not PHB. Player's Handbook. We'll just go with 2014. I think that's the majority of what they would have had access to. I feel like background could have been a knight, potentially. And then otherwise, I would say soldier, maybe sailor. Big maybe on that one. It would be some sort of position of authority, but not one of necessarily power. So I would think that for in terms of background. What were the other questions? Obviously, there's still name. And then I think there was another background. La 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 la. Wait. So, where was it? Where was it? I don't know. I'm already losing the plot. Race, I think human. Yeah, race. Race/species, I think human. And name, I think, is going to be something rather serious. Something like Inspector Frank Tell. Or something like that. A former Inspector Frank Tells. I'm thinking I'm thinking really if anyone's ever read Brian McClellan's Powder Mage trilogy. I have a big image in my mind of Adamat, Inspector Adamat from the Powder Mage trilogy. That's what I'm picturing for C2 Liam. So yeah, I think Frank Tells. Laura, I also remember for Laura, I said some manner of cleric. I think I landed on trickster cleric. And I don't remember, and hers is the one that I think I know the name of already. And I think like cleric, the easiest one is acolyte. I could also see a trickster cleric. A classic one for that is charlatan, criminal, or spy. I could see charlatan. I think charlatan feels right for C2 Laura. And then I don't remember what I said because I think I also guessed race originally. But I think I'll throw out one of the small races. I feel like possibly gnome, possibly halfling. I could see her flexing small race for Jester. So weird that you get the name exactly, yeah? Frank Tells, yeah. Liam Frank. Yeah, Frank. How does he not do it? I think for Grog, I was actually it felt weirdly confident of, I thought he was going to be an inquisitive rogue and or mastermind rogue, which is actually, in retrospect, similar to what he played in the Screwjob, which I just realized yesterday hasn't come out. Sorry. It's been like a 95% done for like 2.5 months. I really need to like make that cross the finish line so that I can finally release it. Ooh, my bad. What was Laura's character's name? That's the one that I believe I've gotten spoiled for myself. I believe her C2 name is Jester. I think. I saw it in a comment. I tried to really quickly delete it before I absorbed anything else. Also could have been C3. Also might not have been, But I feel as though it would be disingenuous of me to guess a different name when I do think that. Last name guess? I think no last name. I even think it could be like a code name. I think she could have like an actual name and Jester's just like a code name or an alias that she goes by to protect her identity. I could see that. Which and the Travis thing, right? With me thinking he was going to play an inquisitive rogue. After he played it in the Screwjob, I'm almost like, will he in C2? But it was a one shot, who knows how much that put him on versus put him off of actually playing one. I'm gonna stick with it for now, though. I think Inquisitive Rogue, I even think that they could have a connection. It's possible that maybe Grog is like an up-and-comer in the department that Liam worked in. And possibly even like they have a connection, maybe former partners. Maybe Travis's character is a little bit more starry-eyed, whereas Liam's character's kind of seen the shit and is a bit disillusioned with the establishment at this point, whereas Grog's Inquisitive Rogue hasn't seen enough of the dark side of the establishment of the department yet. And so maybe they have that connection. Maybe they've just, heard of each other. I don't know. But I could see that. There is no Travis, only Grog, right? Travis. I think also probably human. I could also see possible wood elf, but I think probably also human. I don't even remotely remember what I said for. Oh, and I think background will be probably folk hero. I think he was a folk hero and like got the money to move to the big city. I think he like solved like a big case out in the country that allowed him to move there. He was maybe kind of almost seen as like a genius prodigy sort of thing out where he grew up, and then he hits the big city and people kind of laugh off the case that he solved. Possible even that case comes back in the actual plot of C2. Maybe it was a little bit deeper than he originally thought. And possible even that he got the wrong guy. And possible that the establishment covered it up. I don't know. Could be. Yeah, I don't remember shit about Keyleth. Travis is such a good role player that Mary keeps calling him Grog. I'm saying. Playing that one shot could have scratched an itch or merely whetted the appetite. Exactly. I don't know. And then name for him, I think he's gonna have almost like a country bumpkin name. I think it's gonna be like Jebediah. Possibly just straight up Jebediah. Maybe Jebediah Waters. I'm thinking something named after a natural feature. Almost like the bastard names in Game of Thrones, where it's like Jon Snow. I don't remember what the bastard from King's Landing is. What the last name ends up being. But it's like I think Rivers is if you grew up in the Erie. I think it's gonna have something with that sort of feel to it, where it's like named after like a natural feature. So I'm gonna go Jebediah Waters. And then King's Landing is Waters. There you go. I'll go with that. And then Rivers is Riverland. Right. What's the King's Bastard that's in Stone is Erie. Stone was the one I was thinking of, but that's, yeah. Anyways, Frank tells Jester Jebediah Waters. And then Marisha, God, I wish I remembered what class. I think she's going to go a marshal or a quasi-marshal. I think maybe I guessed a monk for her. That feels right currently. I feel possibly monk for her, a marshal that still has this sort of spiritual bent to it. And I possibly drunken master, and her and Frank are now drinking buddies, because drunken master would have been out at this point. So I could see a monk drunken master. I could also see, I don't think it would be 4 elements. I think that would be too much of that would be too similar to Keyleth. I could also just see open hand, classic. Background, possibly Possibly Sage. I could also see Pirate. Possible. I could see Noble. You know what? Just for the fun of it, I think she's going to be a disgraced noble. I think possibly she was raised in nobility, similar to Percy. But rather than the entire family, being betrayed, sort of having that fall of grace, I think that her character was exiled from nobility because of possible philandering, possible drink, that sort of thing. And I don't know how and I think that after that, she possibly went to a monastery, possibly was exiled to a monastery by her family. Like, her family was like, God damn, you're such a disappointment. We're sending you to the monastery, clean up your act, or just stay there. Stay out of trouble. I think that's the sort of thing. I think she got sent to the monastery as a way of being like, you need to get out of the limelight. You are far too embarrassing to our family. You keep making the news. Get out of here. And there, she never gives up her proclivity for drink, and eventually becomes the drunken master. But still gets those that first monk level at least. And then possibly something happens. I don't feel that she burned down the monastery, but I think something happened to the monastery. It was burned down. It was raided. Something to that effect. And she decides to disappear. Basically, doesn't fake her own death in that sort of sense. Like, doesn't fake her own death, but accepts the fact that her family and the general public think her to be dead. Her former identity. Possibly she even has a big old scar, like a big burn scar on her face that makes her not immediately recognizable. Maybe if she reveals her identity, people can see it, but it's not something that she has to consistently worry about. And I think that either her and Liam are now drinking buddies, or potentially have a connection in that sense. Name is, I think she has an alias. Possibly, I'm feeling an alias of something like Amy/Amelia, and then her actual, and that's it, no last name, and then her true identity is something very colorful, very blah 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 blah, very Versifia of House, Lannistia. It's something there. I'm gonna say Voracifia of House Toldwell. Sure. Yeah. Voracea. We'll go with. Is D&D Drunken Master actually drunken, not based on the martial arts technique? I believe it is mostly based on the martial arts technique. I don't think they're actually drunken, but I do think that there's some implication that they either can be drunken or they just go after the actual style. Let's see. Many monks find the structured life an ascetic. Other monks believe immersing themselves in the vibrant confusion of life. I don't think that there's monk subclasses. What am I doing? Oh, wait. This is just this isn't. I clicked on Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Why did it not? What? It's just taking me to monk. What's going on? Oh, I'm not logged in. Okay, yeah. I don't think it's a requirement for Drunken Master, but I think it is a possibility. Yeah. Not the Lannisters. Never watched that show. Yeah. Do get Brewer's Supply Artisan Tool. There you go. You also haven't tried to get Sam. That's true. I would be truly shocked if Taliesin is not the Blood Hunter. I would be shocked. I believe that Blood Hunter came out in time for C2, and I would be shaking in my boots if Taliesin is not the Blood Hunter. And I think the Blood Hunter is gonna have a name kind of like Scar in Full Metal Alchemist. I think it's gonna be like something like Vengeance or fucking or maybe even something that's not that insane but is still very basic. It's gonna be something like Moon or or he's gonna be like named after the first person that he ever killed. It's like, my name is Tagwin. Oh, you don't really look like a Tagwin. I'm not. I took this name from the first person that fell to my hand. something like that. He's gonna have something along those lines, I think. So I don't even know that I can guess his name because it's all based on the first person he killed. And I think that his background is probably gonna be something random, like guild merchant, and he went through a big traumatic event. Not necessarily like Percy. I don't think it'll be targeted. I think it'll be some manner. It might even be that his former event is as an acolyte. It might even be that Talisin's character, we'll go with Tagwin. Why not? That Tagwin and Amy were at the same monastery, and his background is as an acolyte, but he gets totally fucked up in the raid. That was totally a wrong place, wrong time. Maybe just like raiders just perusing the countryside, maybe an invading military, maybe something to do with the corrupt establishment that is the same reason that Liam's character left the policing force. Something within there, something that shows the evil rot at the core of humanity, the undirected hatred that we inflict upon each other. The fact that it was untargeted, it makes it all that much the worse. And he has taken on this curse to burn out the rot at the center of humanity, the nation, something along those lines. Now, Sam, and then I'll do Ashley. Samuel, I think I could see something with Samuel as I don't remember what I said, and maybe I struggled with it the first time. I don't quite know. He seems to like casting. I could see Sam on a warlock. I could also see Ashley on a warlock. I think one of them. What have I said so far in terms of marshals? I've said. What have I said? Wizard, cleric, rogue, monk. So we've got 2 marshals there. Blood Hunter, I think, is like a third caster, if I remember correctly, or maybe half. So they've got kind of marshals covered. I think Ashley and Sam will be warlock. I think Ashley might be celestial, maybe. I could also see her being goo. I could also see her being hexblade. I think Sam. I'm gonna guess that Sam is actually the warlock, but I think he's gonna be a celestial warlock. I think there's a shot that Sam plays almost an altar boy type character, that big starry-eyed sort of thing. I think him and Travis's character are going to continue to get along in that they share this thematic innocence to them. And I think that his patron is going to be revealed over the course of the show to potentially have motivations and want Sam to do things that maybe Sam's character isn't totally comfortable with. Oh, Michael found it. Michael found it. Wait. Oh, what is it? What is it? What is it? What is it? Laura, halfling trickster cleric. So I was right about that. Okay, Travis, inquisitive rogue. I remembered. Taliesin. I forgot race for those two. So I guess human for Taliesin. I think, yeah, I still think that fits. Liam, human wizard. Yeah, and fuck it. Let's throw a subclass on to Liam's wizard. I think it's going to be divination. I think divination. Former investigator. Divination wizard. Marisha, half elf, monk of the sun soul. Oh, I said sun soul, did I? I'm going to update it. I'm going to update it to drunken master. I like that for it. And I think it's a good potential connectivity there. I could see her going sun soul, but I'll update it to drunken master. And I will keep it with elf though, and I'll keep it on potentially high elf to get back at her nobility heritage. I am half orc, wild magic sorcerer, Ashley, silver, dragonborn, celestial warlock. Okay, so I was right in the right. I'm consistent, I guess, in thinking warlock and sorcerer for Sam and Ashley. Oh, do I want to update that? Because Celestial Warlock, I think I could see for Ashley, just based on her possibly wanting to play a similar character because she didn't get to play a lot of Pike. But almost, I don't know. I think she won't. And almost here's why. I think that she is going to be the sorcerer, maybe wild magic. And I think that I do know that they do build in a more consistent contrivance for why Ashley is not there, like why she comes in and out of campaign 2. I think it could have something to do with a sorceress bent, especially if she's wild magic. I could absolutely see the wild magic sorcery being a key component of what brings her in and out of the sessions. So I'm gonna go wild magic sorcerer for Ashley instead. And I'll keep it with Silver Dragonborn. Why not? We'll keep it with Silver Dragonborn. I think her background is going to be potentially Outlander, and I think she might have a sort of a more physically oriented name, something like Tooth and Claw, or Shifting Scales, something of that type of feel, you know? I think Shifting Scales, that's what I'll say. She could even have her specific quirk, where possibly her wild magic, anytime she rolls on the wild magic table, she also rolls like a 1d8, and her dragonborn coloring shifts. Every time she rolls on wild magic, she has to also roll on a custom table of dragonborn coloration and potentially shift. Maybe it's all chromatic, maybe it's all metallic, maybe it's all of it. She switches between chromatic and metallic, depending on her wild magic roll. Or you just link certain rolls on the wild magic table to certain colorations of dragon. I think that could be kind of fun, kind of wacky. And I think the name derived from that would be Shifting Scales, is what I could see. Maybe goes by Scales, maybe goes by Shift, something along those lines. Whether that's right or wrong, that's just a cool idea. Thank you, I appreciate it. High Elf Drunken Master, exactly. And then my friend Sam. Do I still think that I don't see Celestial for Sam. Upon seeing a lot of Sam, I still don't think Celestial goes with him. I could still see half orc. I could see half orc, why not? Warlock for Sam. I could see Goo. If it had come out at this point, I would be so in. I would be so in on Sam being a genie warlock. I could see he gives me big genie warlock energy. Given that it hasn't, though, what do we have as options? In Xanathar's, it's Celestial and Hexblade. I think those are the only new additions. And then PHB is Goo, Fiend, and Archfey. I could see Archfey for Sam's. Goo. I can't see Fiend. I can't see Celestial. Don't really see Hexblade for him either. I see Sam as a big flex. Oh, also Undying, but Undying sucks donkey ass. Or is it Undead? No. Undead's fine. Undying sucks. And I don't think Sam would go something that sucks, honestly. I think he would be able to suss it out ahead of time. I see him as Goo. And I think he's going to play a little bit of a weirder. I think he's going to lean into the weird aspect during C2. Sorry, what's Goo? Oh, yeah, Great Old One. Great Old One is Goo. It's like the Lovecraftian deity or power. Yeah, I think he'll be Great Old One. I think he will be starry-eyed. I think he'll still be starry-eyed. But I think he'll be just like, I think he'll lean into like just being like a weird fucking kid. I think he is a weird kid that has trouble making friends, is into weird shit, is potentially a bit of a pariah. And I think he might have even stumbled into the Goo by accident, just given his... I'm thinking about me as a kid. I think that Sam was potentially just reading through books in an area of the library, not even restricted, just unutilized possibly, that just engages with his special interests. I think that Sam's character was potentially interested in this, very weird form of magic, a type of magic that people know exists, but maybe it only has application in it's broadly seen. This entire type or study of magic is only seen as an alternative method towards light spells. And it accomplishes it through manipulating the darkness, through essentially absorbing the darkness, and light is more capable of filling the void, filling the vacuum. And it's just seen as like kind of weird, not necessarily scary, but almost useless. Why would you go and do that sort of research when you could just pray to the gods? Every god provides some manner of light magic. So it's almost seen as useless. But for some reason, Sam's character's interested. He's doing more research. He finds something that maybe he shouldn't have. And I think it's possible that the Goo isn't even aware of him. I think it's possible that he isn't even aware of the Goo. They might be fucking ships in the night, man, where he is blatantly unaware of his patron. And I think it's possible. I'll even throw out this big prediction that Sam's character, we'll still go half-orc for Sam's race. We'll still go half-orc. I think it's possible that Sam's character, totally unaware that he has fallen into a pact, but something about him registers on Talison's hunter senses. Tagwin. I think that it's something about it registers on his senses, and I think that Sam's character is one of Tagwin's targets. I think he is hunting down aberrations, things that should not be in this world. Again, cleansing the rot. But when he meets Sam, he just can't do it. He just can't do it. He realizes that Sam's character is totally unaware of the taint on his soul. And ostensibly, the taint is not making him do bad things. He's still a good kid. Even if he's a little bit odd, he seems at his core good. And I think that this is a not pre-stream, I guess, pre-campaign dilemma for Tagwin. This is going to be one of his possibly core character conflicts, at least at the beginning of C2. And he is, and potentially he says to himself, damn it, I can't let him roam, like he's about to kill him. And this all happens pre-campaign. About to kill him, and Sam's character is just confused. Doesn't know why, doesn't know what's happening, doesn't know why Tagwin is saying all these things. And Tagwin sees that. He sees the truth and the innocence and the honesty and stops himself and says, I need to keep an eye on him. Mentally, he says, I need to keep an eye on him. I need to make sure that the infection doesn't spread. Maybe I can just do containment. And I think that one of the things as they level up through C2, as ostensibly the rot on Sam's character's soul spreads, possibly Sam will start exhibiting more of the signs of the pact. Possibly there's a moment where he breaks through and he views the great, unfathomable being at the core of his power, and it does maybe start to affect his behavior. And Tagwin has to reckon with that. Sam's character has to reckon with that. Big, like, third of the way through the campaign, conflict and inter-party drama of sorts. Name. I think something that reeks of innocence. I can't, like Andy Aloysius or something like that, you know? I don't even know if that definitely reeks of innocence, but a name that you picture wearing one of those like pinwheel hats. Bert? Sure. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Is that all of them? I think that's all of them. I don't know how Ashley will work into it. I could possibly see Ashley's character being related to, I almost said Vex, to Laura Bailey's. In some way, I could see their kind of unstable or maybe not socially acceptable magics having made them run in similar circles before. They could potentially be working for the same organization. They could potentially be connected by a guild, perhaps. Something like that. Yeah. If Goo does the patron know powers being drawn, it explicitly highlights that they may not. If I remember correctly. That's how I've always run it, at least. Goo is... I think that there is always a possibility that a warlock patron is unaware of the pact, but I think that is even higher possibility with Goo. I think it's an extreme possibility that the Goo is totally unaware that their power is being drawn. I mean, fuck, the Goo might not even be like conscious or like have an awareness in the way that we think of consciousness and awareness. They might be closer to a primordial force on the universe, or a sleeping Goliath, a sleeping behemoth, than anything so conscious as to be aware of a power draw, especially from something so comparably insignificant as a mortal warlock. You know what I'm saying? Starting location for C2, continent, city, location. Bro, at this point, I am coming more to the idea that Wildmount might not be in this fucking campaign. I'm coming more and more to the conclusion that they might run through Taldore and that might be the entire setting of the campaign. Maybe they have a small stint in Wildemount, but I think it's more likely that they go back to Ank'Harel and or Vasselheim than they go anywhere in Wildemount. The only exception that I can see is them possibly going to Wildemount because one of the names on Animus is in Wildemount. Like, I think there's a strong likelihood that King Bertrand is the ruler of whatever Wildmountian nation the Briarwoods were originally from. I think there's a decent shot of that, and if they end up investigating the Animus names, that might lead them towards a stint in Wildemount. But I think it's becoming, in my opinion, more and more likely that Wildemount will be the starting location of C2. Possibly the Ravine or Draconia, like revived new Draconia, might be the starting location. I could see that. Fucking, I don't even know any other cities in I don't know any other cities, at least by heart, in Wildemount. So I'm going to call it. I'm going to say that the interior of the ravine is referred to either as like the ruins of Draconia or old Draconia, and that the city is now New Ravinia. Big call. I think there's going to be a bit of a time skip, and maybe we'll call it 30, 40, 50 years. Maybe 100, maybe 100. The only problem with it skipping 100 is that Grog would be dead unless something, or extended his life in some way, because Goliaths don't live that long. Everyone else, and same thing with Percy. But everyone else would still be alive if it was 100 years. And I think I have an instinct that Vox is going to be, or some subset at least of Vox is going to be around in the time of C2. I think that, and I could really see someone like a Vax or a Keyleth taking on an almost Yoda-esque role, more not more relevant than Yoda, an Obi-Wan Kenobi type role. 100 years is too much if you want everyone to be alive, but too little if you want everyone to be dead. Yeah. But the other ones, obviously all of the half-elves have an extended time frame that they're going to be alive. Also, anyone that's religiously tied, Ashley, Vax, they have the possibility of some divine elongation of their lives. Obviously, Keyleth with Archdruid business. I think there's a possibility that Percy might invent some sort of mechanical anti-aging thing. I could see it. And then Scanlan, gnomish time frame makes sense. Grog is really the one that it's like, man, there's like almost no way that Grog is still alive if it's like 100 years. The reason I think it might be 100 years is because if it does start in this idea of New Ravinia, I think that enough time should have passed for a lot of the events, a lot of the people that were around during the Draconia days, I think should be dead. That's why I'm thinking like 100 years. Like, I think Tuma, dead. Anyone that was enslaved by the Skywalkers, I think should be dead. To give it that really like fresh, like post-tragedy, post-tragic era feel, where now they're just dealing with the ramification, possible reparations, a lot of that sort of deal. And it would have allowed a lot of the events and a lot of the exploits of Vox Machina to fade a bit into legend. in a way that I think could be played for a lot of interest, especially if they're still alive. You can do an easy, like, wow, never meet your heroes sort of scene. Or like, man, these heroes of legend are more complicated and nuanced than the legends might make you think. I mean, even something I could see being possibly elevated to some manner of almost quasi-divine status, especially given Ashley or Pike and Vax's connection to the gods. I think there could be a rumor that fades into fact, air quotes, that like Keyleth was really into Melora, maybe worshipped Melora, despite the reality of Keyleth's not necessarily atheism, but borderline, nuanced agnosticism, we'll call it. An unwilling saint. Yes. And then they meet her and she's, I can imagine old Keyleth being so grumpy, and someone does praise Melora in the same almost tone of voice that they did. Oh God, what was the thing in Ankarel? The not praise be, it's Budaba. Oh damn it, I can't remember their whole shtick in Ankarel. Be pleased, yeah, be pleased, bidet. I could see them in the same like tone of voice doing something along the beep lines to old Keyleth, like praise Melora, and her being like the or something to the effect of like, maybe there's some sort of thing of like, as it's done in Melora's house, and old Keyleth being like, Melora has nothing to do with it. And slamming the door in their face or walking off into the next room to grumpily prepare tea. I could really see old Keyleth being a mentor figure to possibly Drunken Master, to possibly Talison's character, to potentially Laura's character, Ashley's character. Or she could just provide insight on a quest. She might not even be like an actual mentor figure, but she might just be this like figure of legend, almost in a similar vein to like Osisa or Kamal Jaori or something like that. Yeah, and I feel like she's going to be like in the Zephyra, just like being the Archdruid, that sort of thing. What are we talking about? Yeah. But I could also see, not just Keyleth, I could see a lot of the characters inhabiting that sort of role. I could easily see Vax and starting a sect of like Raven Queen warriors. And he's like this grizzled, he's almost, I could easily see Vax being incredibly Jaheira coded. It like Jaheira in BG3. Where now she like leads the Harpers and they're kind of like a spec ops sort of group. I could absolutely see him being the grizzled veteran that maybe he even like bases himself in the Zephyra, and maybe Keyleth's found a way to possibly elongate his life. Maybe his like time passes differently for him while they're in the Zephyra or something like that. So that's how his life has gotten elongated a bit. And the Raven Queen doesn't make too much of a fuss because he's started this like Spec Ops Raven Queen Warriors type group. I could see that. Yeah. I could see that easily. And he might be like someone that the C2 party goes to. Burt Reynolds. Let's see. How many episodes until they decide their adventuring party name? Weirdly enough, I think that they will have it mentally decided beforehand. Like, I think that they will decide it before the stream. I think that their characters will decide it. I'm going to clock it episode 10 or 15. I think there's going to be some sort of joke that is made similar to the shits. And they're gonna stick with it. But I think that they're going to be kind of looking for an excuse to make that joke for a little bit. I'm loving the neurodivergent kid and the primeval entity that they have a parasocial relationship with backstory. Yeah. Absolutely. That's absolutely how I can see Sam's character. Yeah. What's your name? Is it worth looting? And their unwilling babysitter? Yes. I think Taliesin and Sam could be very unwilling babysitter sort of deal. Frank Tells, Jester, Jebediah Waters, Bert Aloysius, Tagon, Emmy Vor something of I don't know and Shifting Scales. Yeah, exactly. What are the ships? Bro, I could see a delightful gay romance between these two. In a very I don't know if Sam's character will actually be a kid. He might just have the innocence of one, very like bookworm-esque. And potentially Tagwin like had all of his trauma when he was real young. So it's possible that when they met and Tagwin spared Aloysius or whatever, it's possible that they were like 15 and 13 at the time, or maybe even older, maybe 17 and 15. And now at the time of C2, they're like 23 and 21 or something like that, and they've been traveling together for a little bit. And I could see a lovely gay romance sprouting from that. Aang and Zuko vibes. Yeah, sure. I could also see the I could see the hardened noir, like the hardened noir detective and the chaotic either wild magic sorcerer and or trickster cleric that's always trying to get a rise out of, always pushing his buttons and really enjoys his sort of grump, his grumpy nature. I could see them having a ship, which I guess leaves what did I say for Keyleth? I already don't remember. Amy, right, the former noble. I could see them. I could see Travis's character. What did I say? Jebediah Waters. I could see Jebediah Waters instantly recognizing who Amy is. And it's a whole cute scene where he tells her like 10 episodes, 12 episodes in. He maybe even it's like a slip of the tongue. He might even say something like in the heat of the moment, something akin to like Your Highness. And there's like a dead stop. And she's like, what did you say? And he's like, nothing, Amy. And she's like, no. What the fuck did you just say? And he reveals that he knows who she's, and she gets very defensive, maybe puts him in a headlock, whatever, holds a knife to his throat. And she's like, who told you? Who are you working with? Who's after me? And he's like, no one. And she's like, I don't believe you, insight, whatever. And he's and it's a cute moment. She says something to the akin of, no one's ever known who I was. Someone must have told you. Someone must be after me from my past. She says something to the akin of, no one's ever seen it. And he goes, I could have never mistaken you for anyone else. And she's like, and she goes, bullshit, like the something akin to like the burn is too extensive. And he lays down a line of like, what burn? Something like that. Or I barely noticed. Yeah, there's no mistaking you for anyone else, Your Highness. Some fucking line I could see. And her being like, oh. I could see there being a little bit of suave energy coming out of Jebediah. A very earnest, honest suaveness. A very genuine. I think in a party that will have a lot of deceit, even from him himself. I think that Sam's character and his character are going to be the most genuine, and it will be sort of weird for the rest of the party members, but in an endearing way. That's what I think. Vex could put Percy in the locket? That's so true. Oh my god. What if someone gets like mortally wounded? Someone's on like double death saves or something, and Vex puts them in the locket until medicine has advanced enough to save them? That could be wacky. That could be wacky. So one of the Vox characters gets somehow revived in the time of C2 and no time at all has passed for them. That could be kind of crazy. And they contend with all of their old party members being all old and gross and shit. That could be fun. That could be a real fun dynamic. The traveler out of time. Yeah. Really great bands at New Ravinia. Picnic on the grass. Yeah. Yeah, I think New Ravinia is going to be a sick place to live. Yeah. Tomb is not making it to next year. Yeah. What do you think the team name for C2 is? Like I said, I think it's going to be a stupid ass joke. I think it's going to be a stupid joke. I don't think it's going to have much to do with anything. Or maybe it'll have to do with something that like the starting arc or like the way that they all combine together. Something akin to like the Queen, like the Kingsman or like the Queensman or something around there. I think it's going to probably have to do with the opening arc. If I had to guess, but otherwise, I don't know. Without power for unauthorized person on the tracks? Oh no, that's not good. Who's gonna be smooching? Starting level? I think starting level is gonna be level 1. I think they're gonna go at level 1. They might zoom through the starting levels quicker than they should. Possibly like have like double XP or something, but I think they're gonna be level 1. Wouldn't it just be easier to, just make the time skip shorter? Maybe. I'm valuing a larger passage of time over the involvement of Vox Machina. I think that Vox Machina will exist in C2 as fun callbacks. I don't think that they're going to be like plot critical. Or at least Matt will design the campaign in a way to where they don't need. Well, I guess, yeah, that would be plot critical. That is basically definition of. Yeah, I don't think they're going to be plot critical to C2. I think they're going to be like a fun thing that might come up if they, encounter the right people. So I'm, in terms of actually like the campaign setup, I believe more that they will go towards some sort of time skip than more involvement from Vox. Do all adventuring parties need a name? No, asterisk. You don't need a name. I will say I do think that a name helps. I think it helps a lot of things. I think it helps when taking notes. I think it helps when doing world building stuff. I think it helps for a sense of party cohesion and identity. I think it has a lot of value and very little. I think it has a lot of positives and very few negatives. So I think that it is something that is definitely not necessary, and definitely not necessary like at the very start. But it is something that I try to look out for and even like pitch to my players like, oh, what do you think about that as like a name that I can refer to you guys as in like world building notes, even if they rarely refer to it themselves. Classic sunshine cinnamon roll and brooding tragic backstory. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Percy is Walt Disney. Absolutely. Got his head frozen. How many of the party does Kima kill? Kima kills no one. Kima's good. As much as I hate to say it, I am so much more suspicious on so many other people at this point than Kima. Oh, man. But since we're doing long-term predictions, sure, yeah. Is the end of C1 going to be uplifting or downer? Ooh. I think it's going to be hesitantly optimistic, is what I'll say. I think it's, hesitantly optimistic. I think that there is going to be maybe some sort of implication of like the cycle, like the cosmic cycle of violence, potentially, with like the universe was born from the violent, chaotic, primordial ooze, and our attempt at making things safer only prompted more violence and discord between the gods, which ultimately resulted in more wars, more violence. And I think that there might be some symbology of the never-ending repetition, the never-ending cycle of this violence. But I also think that there will be an optimistic, like, kind of tint to all of that of, yes, there is this cycle of violence and death and destruction and chaos, but there is also a cycle of hope and heroes and good people that stand up time after time, despite the secular nature of everything, despite the fact that we can never seem to escape the never-ending assault of death and destruction. There are still people that choose to stand up and rage against the darkness despite the futility of it all. And not only do those people exist now, not only are Vox those people, but they are just one group in a line. They are one manifestation of the hope and resiliency of mortals. And I can see this being a super, almost explicit sort of deathbed conversation with the villain, with the final villain. Let's say it's Vecna. Right, Vecna is a demigod, wanted to attain godhood, immortality, essentially rise above the cycle. And towards the end, as Vox Machina is clearly one, Vecna gives a long rant about the futility of their actions, that Vecna was not the first and will not be the last. And I could see a sort of killing blow of, well, that may be, but Vox Machina isn't the first, and we won't be the last. I think it's going to have that manner of tone. Yeah, adventurers will need to come afterward, but we have faith that they will. And so the future is in good hands. I think that's going to be the sort of takeaway. So I guess it depends on whether on your own internal morality as to how uplifting or depressing you think that is. Yeah, that's where I lean. Yeah, I guess it could also be up to interpretation, regardless of what actually happens. Exactly. I think in that situation that I just described, I think that is kind of open to interpretation on how hopeful you think it is, or how uplifting or depressing you think that is. Yeah, I think it'll be something like that. So you think the C2 party is also good? I guess, yeah. That is a broad assumption I've been making. I think they will broadly align with good. I think. Yeah. Top 3 suspicious people? Like people that are like that seem good but might be bad. I think it's Allura. I think Drake Thunderbrand. And the current spiraling of the clasp. I think it's Vikar. Or maybe Vikar is the one that they killed. Whatever the current spiraling is, who doesn't like them very much, but according to people that have been in Iman, is like helping. Like Raishan said that she was working with the clasp and that Assume is working with the clasp. I buy it, but I don't buy the clasp's allegiances here. I think they are somewhat playing the long game, and that they would sabotage any true attempt at taking down Thordak. In fact, to somewhat support my idea, I will point to, I believe I wrote it down in Thordak's. I know I'm not showing it on screen, but yeah, it won't really matter. It's something that Raishan said about Thordak. It might be, no, okay, it's in Raishan's article. Let me see. That's her backstory. No, we don't need the backstory. We need her description. Aha, Assume center. What's their plan? Right here. Raishan says, what's their plan? Sorry, Aura Vex says, what's their plan? To Raishan in regards to Assume and the clasp's plan. And Raishan responds, one that'll fail, of course. You see, they put their knowledge in what a red dragon is capable of. They believe that by quelling the flames or stoking some nature of the crystal in the belly's magic, there would be a way to stop him. And there is a path to be taken there, but their knowledge is faulty. They don't understand the nature of the enchantment, and should they attack, they will burn in the flames of their own righteousness. I think that the clasp has that knowledge, but Assume doesn't. And I think that the clasp is actively sabotaging Assume and the party's information network from learning that additional information. And they are setting themselves up in a position to where they are going to be along for whatever the plan is. Like, and it sounds like any plan that they are taking against Thordak, the clasp is going to be involved in. So even in a, I'm sure from the clasp's perspective, worst case scenario where they somehow find out the information that Raishan says they don't have, the clasp will still be embedded deeply enough to within the plan to learn about the fact that they have the knowledge beforehand and probably feed that to Thordak, and to sabotage the plan either ahead of time or in the moment to where it fails. I think that they are setting them up as an ally, but they are really they're a double agent as a broad faction. So top three: Allura, Drake, Mr. I'm a Dragon, Drake Thunderbrand, and the current spiraling. Those are my suspicions. Those groups should get out of line. It's very tempting for lightning attacks. Yeah. Not Ayun. Gods aren't people. I wouldn't even say I'm necessarily suspicious of Ayun in that way. I think that Ayun is getting misinterpreted by the general public. So I wouldn't even say I'm suspicious of Ayun. But I think that the divine wars, it seems to be portrayed to have two locked solid sides of good and evil. And I don't think that Ayun actually falls into either of those categories. Despite my clickbait stream title. Yeah. Ayun is evil. What did I miss? I talked about it at the beginning. No, I think Ayun is just not good. I think Ayun is not good. That's it. She's negation on the good. But that's not as good of a stream title. Burn in the flames of their own righteousness is a sweet line. It is. It's sick. Oh man. Anyways, that's where I'm gonna leave it. I honestly went a bit over my time, but I was having fun, and I think we were all having fun a little bit. I didn't see the viewership was staying pretty high, so I think I sometimes I do check that sort of thing of like if I'm having a big long convo at the end, I'm like, okay, are a lot of people leaving or a lot of people interested? And things were staying pretty high, so I thought you guys were probably interested. So yeah. I was having a good time. I'm excited to see if how next episode progresses. Like if we have another quasi downtime or another sort of slow ep, or if we start building some momentum into the Thordak fight. We'll have to see. But yeah. Anyways, that's it. Thanks again. And I will see you all later. Goodbye.